Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
You can tell a lot about where a company is going by looking at where it's been. ConocoPhillips, Alaska's oil and gas company.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 22nd of January. As always, we encourage you to visit our website for more information about your weather situation in your part of Alaska. You can do that by going to weather.gov or using your NOAA Weather Radio. Our website that shows the entire state all at once and all of the groups that serve your Alaska communities found at arh.noaa.gov if you like that view. And the weather info line on the telephones open at 800-472-0391. You can find each Weather Service office on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook under U.S. National Weather Service Alaska, and on YouTube in the afternoon. Of course, you get your daily briefing about midway through the afternoon. And after this show on alaskapublic.org, you can find the complete broadcast of what you're watching right now. You can also go to YouTube and search for AKWX TV. Here's a look at the hazardous weather situation across all of Alaska. Starting in the northern Gulf Coast, a fire hose of rainfall working its way northward once again tonight. Some places there along the North Gulf Coast could be looking at as much as 6 to 8 inches of rainfall. Some cases around Prince William Sound, that could range a little bit more like 4 to 8 inches. No advisories there just yet. For the northern Gulf Coast there, including areas around Yakutat, you're looking at a substantial amount of rainfall. We'll check on the picture here in just a minute and show you more information about that situation. Across the Alaska range, we're talking about some gusts that could reach upwards of 45 to 50 miles per hour. Wind advisories are posted there, and winter weather advisories posted a little bit farther west, including parts of the Arctic coast and the Chukchi Sea coast, looking at some light snowfall there and some freezing rain potential across the lower and middle Yukon valleys into the Norton Sound region. Most of that will be relatively light, maybe a tenth of an inch or so, along with some accumulating snow and gusty winds that will make travel a little bit more tricky. Out to the west, speaking of more wind and more snow, there's a potential for blizzard conditions across the Pribilof Islands that will start tomorrow afternoon. So a blizzard watch is in effect for the Pribilofs at this point as we look ahead toward Thursday. Here's a look at the situation now across the northern Gulf Coast. We're checking on potential precipitation. This is going to take us just to the period of 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. And if you're thinking that's not not really far out and ahead in the future, well, that's because there's a lot more precipitation beyond that point as well. This is just a small slice of what's to come for the north and eastern Gulf Coast. We've got that fire hose that we're talking about, just a river of very wet air pointed right at some of the very high terrain across the north and eastern Gulf Coast. You can kind of see a bullseye of the color here. This would be Yakutat right about here. Cordova's right about here. And we're talking about precipitation amounts that are pushing 6, 7, even 8 inches of rain just before 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. Well, after that, a lot of this is going to reset. You'll see a similar picture for tomorrow and the next day. Many areas along the north and even the northeastern Gulf Coast will just be extraordinarily soggy thanks to that continued pattern and flow from the south. It's the same thing that's brought us the warm and wet weather. You can see that on the satellite picture here. Take a look at the circulation down to the south of Kodiak Island, and here's that river of air working its way northward toward the north and eastern Gulf. Sitka, Juneau, Yakutat, looking at rainfall there. Some of this again is going to be very heavy in the next 24 hours, not to mention the next 48 and 72 hours. Clouds are working their way over the Alaska range and in between places like Anchorage and the western Kenai. I haven't seen a great deal of precipitation just in the last 24 hours. In fact, Anchorage has only seen probably a few drips and drops there, but at times that's freezing on the road. So most of that has been pretty light, especially this morning, but just enough to put ice on the road. So if you are driving on the road system, use caution there, as that is still potential in some cases. Light amounts of precip also making their way over the Alaska range as we continue to see that effect take place over the next 3, 4, 5, 7 days or so. We'll be looking at light amounts of snow generally across the Tanana Valley. There's an opportunity for some light freezing rain around Northway tonight. We were seeing some light reports of that earlier today. And more moisture is making its way up to the north and west. And with that, there's an opportunity for some light snow. In some cases, though, as the storm gets a little bit closer to your location, like the Pribilofs, and you combine that with very cold northerly winds, and again, drop the visibility, there's a potential that we could see blizzard conditions, and that's what the Pribilofs are looking at as we head into tomorrow afternoon. It has been snowing in some places like Unalaska today. We saw some reports there, as well as periods of rainfall, probably mixing with snow across the Alaska range. So just a world of interesting weather just in our own little state today. Here's a look at the weather map. As you notice, the triple point low, where the occlusion, the cold front, and the warm front all come together, is working right up over the northern Gulf Coast. There's an awful lot of lift right here and a lot of moisture combined in this single point right here. Well, if you expand that out a little bit more, you also have many other pockets of very strong upward motion that's working to get that rainfall going very efficiently, especially since this front extends almost all the way down through Hawaii. In fact, I believe it actually passed through Hawaii earlier today. So a very substantial draw from the south and the subtropics. So what happens when that subtropical moisture makes it into the 49th state? Well, we wring out quite a bit of it, especially when it's hitting some of the tallest mountains in North America. So a pretty efficient rainmaker here across the Gulf Coast. Nothing that southeast is not experienced before, but again, in the middle of January, it's probably not as welcome. Looking northward toward the Brooks Range, you can see that frontal boundary just locked in place there. There's pockets of light snow and fog across the Chukchi Seacoast, and blowing snow was reported around Barrow earlier today. Out across the north and western parts of the Bering, high pressure is trying to make inroads there. We see that northerly flow wrapping around the backside of low pressure across the North Pacific. That's down to 966 millibars tonight. Periods of heavy rain will continue to work over southeast. We may see some periods of mixed precipitation across Northway and places just to the south of the Yukon Valley. Rainfall will make its way into the Copper River Basin and parts of the Susitna and Matsu valleys. The triple point low still working its way through the northern Gulf Coast and Kodiak, the eastern parts of the Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound, all looking at some potential for pretty heavy rainfall. Again, 6 to 8 inches, as high as 6 to 8 inches, let's say, around Prince William Sound, and some places could see more than that as you push over toward Yakutat. Periods of rain and snow across the south and west. Some of that could be freezing rain as well, and accumulating snow across the western and south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, with low pressure working toward the Alaska Peninsula. It moves into the Bering Sea tomorrow at 975 millibars. Going to be some stronger winds here on the north side, probably looking at gusts that could make it over 30 miles per hour or so. If that's the case, then we'll be watching for blizzard conditions there as long as that temperature is cold enough to make this all snow. If you get into the warm sector again, and there's some question about how that track is going to move close to the Pribilofs, that blizzard conditions may not be met, and you may just see a winter weather advisory. So watch for those changes tomorrow. Across the mid-Yukon Valley, freezing rain still possible there tomorrow. We may see only sprinkles and light rainfall across the Anchorage area and down the Cook Inlet, but heavier rainfall will be impacting areas around Seward, Prince William Sound, Yakutat, into parts of southeast, with snowfall occurring north of Fairbanks. Doesn't look like Fairbanks is going to be dealing with a whole lot of snow tomorrow. Blowing snow possible across the Arctic coast. For Friday, low pressure moving east of the Pribilofs will be fairly close, but again, depending on this track, you could be caught in that stronger northerly flow. So again, the blizzard watch starts tomorrow afternoon. Periods of rain and snow for the Alaska Peninsula. Another weaker front coming into the western parts of the Aleutians you see there, and a southerly flow working its way north again of the Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, and South Central, working over the northern Gulf Coast. High pressures trying to push this whole pattern westward just a little bit there to break up some of the rainfall potential there in central and southern parts of southeast. Temps today back in the mid-40s for southeast around Prince William Sound, low to mid-40s there. 30s for Anchorage. Didn't look like we made it to 40 degrees this afternoon. 34 around Talkeetna, 29 in Fairbanks, 41 in Kodiak, and looking farther northward, really mild stuff there as you get into Fort Yukon, 5 degrees above zero, 9 above in Arctic Village. Looks like temperatures were sub-zero around the Arctic coast, but not really by much at all. The Seward Peninsula hovering around 20, around Nome, 35 and 25, I should say, for St. Lawrence Island. McGrath was showing 29. Bethel, 30 degrees, just a couple degrees shy of freezing. 30s and 40s for southwestern Alaska around Bristol Bay. Low 30s for the Pribilofs, mid 30s for the Alaska Peninsula and parts of the eastern Aleutians until you get out towards Sand Point, a 41-degree temperature there, and 20s and 30s for the central and western parts of the chain. Overnight low temperatures then in the low to mid 30s for south central. Most areas stay above freezing, and for the Aleutians 20s and 30s there. For southeast, expect overnight lows in the 30s and 40s. Sitka 45. Fairbanks looking at a low of 8, only 8 degrees above zero. 5 to 10 below for the Arctic coast. Nome 22 at the high, not really changing too much tomorrow. Low to mid 40s for south central, closer to the coast and in some of that heavier rainfall. Temps may hover in the mid 30s, but still above freezing. 42 in Kodiak. Low to mid 40s for southeast. Look at Sitka, almost 50 degrees there. Same goes for Ketchikan and Annette. Juneau in the lower 40s. 30s for the chain. 31 around St. Paul. 26 in Nunivak Island. Bethel, you're looking at 29 degrees. McGrath closer to 20, and Fairbanks in the mid 20s tomorrow, with Healy showing 40 degrees. Flying weather, a pocket of IFR there across the northern Gulf Coast. This is where that heavy rain is expected to be tomorrow. Same goes for parts of Prince William Sound and down the eastern Kenai Peninsula. Watch for IFR across the western Alaska Range and along the Arctic coast, and from areas west of Nunivak Island all the way down to the eastern parts of the chain. Past conditions then include Anaktuvik, mainly improving toward MVFR during the day. We expect similar conditions in Adigan Pass starting at IFR though. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass we should see hold at IFR through most of the day. Rainy Pass probably getting worse as the day goes on with visibility dropping into IFR conditions. Windy Pass maintains MVFR through most of your Thursday. Isabel Pass we should see instrument flight rule transitioning over toward a marginal restriction, and Mentasta Pass probably IFR conditions through most of Thursday. Toneda Pass may see some major improvements though IFR is expected to start your Thursday morning, and Portage Pass obviously with rain coming in the eastern side should be socked in. Chilkoot and White Pass we expect to see instrument flight rule, maybe some improvements during the day there for the Chilkoot and White valleys, especially on the southern side. The freezing levels then, we've got some cold pockets working northward toward the coast, but you can see the wealth of warm air here coming across the eastern parts of the Gulf, 6, 8, 10,000 feet. Pretty impressive warm and wet air moving into the Gulf Coast. Colder air not really making too many inroads. It's passing down toward the central Aleutians at this point at the surface level, but that warmth is doing its damage across the west, central, and southwestern parts of our state at this point. Icing potential mainly below 4,000 feet. We did see some icing reports across the Arctic coast earlier today. Below 7 and above 4,000 feet for areas in the Bristol Bay area just to the west and south of Nunivak Island, north of the Alaska Peninsula there in the Bering. And below 12,000 but above 6,000 feet for the northern Gulf Coast. Do expect some icing potential here across the north. Some of that could be pretty high up there obviously, but there is plenty of moisture to be had, and there's eventually cool air if you go high enough. Jet stream pattern right now shows that high pressure ridge still locked in place across the west coast, where it's creating very dry and very warm weather here. And for us, it's tapped that subtropical moisture all the way down to our good friends in Hawaii. That stronger southerly flow, anywhere from 150 to 160 knots at times. That is strong enough to keep that moisture feed going right into southern Alaska and push that warmth even farther north into the Arctic. You can see a southwesterly flow also over the Bering Sea. Those wind speeds around 60 knots, and it's reinforced by that flow off of eastern Asia between 160 and 190 knots. So at 9,000 feet, well, you wouldn't expect anything less except a broad southerly flow all the way across the North Pacific and right into southern Alaska, into the interior and the Arctic coast. High pressure anchored just east of Haida Gwaii, also feeding in some faster wind speeds in the northern parts of southeast. Low pressure trying to help us out and dragging in some of that colder air across the western Bering, only at 20 and 30 knots though coming southward. 3,000 feet, winds still broad from the south, anywhere from 40 to 50 knots coming across Kodiak Island. High pressure still sitting in about the same old spot. Southeasterly flow between 40 and 60 knots coming into the north and eastern Gulf, again driving that very wet air right into places like Yakutat. We've got more of a south and easterly flow, almost running parallel to the Arctic coast there, so we'll keep some winds moving mainly from east to west across this level at 3,000 feet, and a little bit of a ridge developing across the central and western Bering Sea. More of a west and easterly flow just south of the chain if you're looking that far out. As we go ahead into turbulence then, below 6,000 feet, we expect some occasional chop, mainly in the western parts of the Brooks Range, with air moving fairly quickly over that higher terrain. And I would not be surprised to see occasional, maybe even isolated, severe across west and southwestern parts of Alaska today, or tomorrow I should say, mainly below 6,000 feet again, all the way from the Yukon Delta, probably out toward the southern parts of the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and into the central parts of the chain. Again, some occasional widespread moderate Probably looking at isolated chop there into the Copper River Basin. But again, some rougher flying weather developing for southwest, south central, and eventually northern parts of southeast as we go ahead through the rest of the week. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Good. We got Mount McKinley in the background, and you're looking real good. Yeah, Roger. We'll be going downhill, dragging it down, and then take a look at the tracks and feel the snow, and then possibly land. Okay, the last circle will be keep an eye on you. I'll watch it out. Okay, we'll be breaking off underneath you. Okay, we'll stay up. And usually I go through a gump, the word gump, meaning gas, undercarriage, prop, mixture, prop, gump. G-U-M-P, and that generally gets me set up for landing. So my gas is on both tanks, my undercarriage is in the ski position, locked. My mixture at this altitude should be about 15 GPH at this setting. I know the elevation of the glacier is where we'll be landing is about 7,000. The light is good, but we don't have any sunlight right on the spot. We'll be coming in high, taking a go over, drag our skis, take a look at it, get a feeling for the depth of the snow, and then turn around. If the snow doesn't feel like it's too deep, we'll turn around and land. This also gives us a feel of the glacier of how it's rolling. That's okay. We're just feeling the snow out is what we're doing here. Feels like we got a good snowpack. It's all right. We've got probably about a foot of snow or so on top of a hard pack, so we're not going to disappear into the powder or anything. How does it feel, Doug? Yeah, it feels good, Lowell. We've got about, feels like about a foot of snow on there on top of a good pack. I think it'll be real good. I'm going to go on in and land, and it looks like they got a big hole there where somebody was camping. And we'll mark that and probably pull up there. It seems like a good flat spot. Okay, well, I'll come in after you. I'll notice that hole. I'll be sure to miss that one, too. Okay, dog. So we're on final southeast port. Okay, I see you. This is the touchy part now, because now on our way in, there's no chance for a go-around. You're just going straight in. All right. I lost my reference. We're going to have to go by and drop those bags off. legs real tight. You're trying to hold your hand outside the window. And then when I say now, towards the bottom of the hill there, that's where we'll have to drop them at the bottom. That'll give me a reference. Go ahead and throw them both out at the same time, and that'll give me a line also. Okay, now.
I think he tried to blow his hat clean off, I think. I think you can wait in here if you like. We probably won't be here much longer. Yeah, watch the door so it won't... Matter of fact, could you shut this one so it won't blow? Okay, that's good. You wouldn't think about it, but one of the more important factors would probably be just a real good shovel. If you ever need a shovel, you'll want a good one. Sometimes the cheap, lighter models that are easy to pack will break or fail on you. It's real important to have a good snow shovel when you're going into these areas and operating on skis. Sometimes you really need it and you want it to work for you.
Haven't needed a shovel too much around South Central lately, that's for sure. Here's a look at the ice edge, and with northerly flow on around St. Matthew, you can see the ice has moved in around the St. Matthew Island waters now and is south of Nunivak Island. Here's the Pribilofs, and still safe from the leading ice edge there, as well as the continental shelf, not getting anywhere close. Got a little bit of shore fast ice there just south of King Salmon and across the northern parts of the Cook Inlet. Still looking at a little bit of ice coverage there. Marine forecast now for Thursday. A broad southeasterly flow sweeping up through the inner channels with the strongest winds across the northern parts of the Lynn Canal at 40 knots with an 8-foot sea. Southeasterly is also running around 25 knots for the central and southern parts of the inner channels. 5-foot seas are expected there. Seas on the coastal areas running as high as 20 feet as you get out toward Yakutat. Of course, that's going to include some stronger gusts and some heavy rain throughout your Thursday there with 20-foot seas, 17-foot seas offshore of Craig and Klawock. As you get into Friday, the winds are shifting a little bit around Stevens Passage and the central parts of southeast. 25-knot winds still coming in from the south across the Lynn Canal with a 5-foot sea. Northwesterlies develop across the southern parts of the inner channels, and you're still looking at a southeasterly flow running up the coastline anywhere from 15 to 30 knots. 17-foot seas there on the north end, 13-foot seas on the south end. In south central, look for an east and southeasterly flow around Prince William Sound, and inside and outside those winds could run anywhere from 25 to 35 knots. 18-foot seas outside of Prince William Sound, but 5-foot seas on the inside, still making it a rough day there. Easterlies coming into the eastern part of the Kenai Peninsula, into some of the higher terrain there of the peninsula itself. 15 to 16-foot seas running into the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay. That makes for 7-foot seas as you get past the Barren Islands. 16-foot seas coming into Kodiak with a 25-knot wind from the south and east. Easterlies inside of Shelikof Strait, and northeasterly flow running down the Cook Inlet. That switches to more of a southeasterly flow on Friday. 10 to 15-knot winds all the way down the Cook Inlet into the Barren Islands. More of a broad southerly flow coming into the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula and east of Kodiak Island. And stronger winds outside of Prince William Sound coming up to 40 knots with a 19-foot sea. Easterlies remain inside Prince William Sound, and seas come up to 6 feet to wrap up the week. Across the Alaska Peninsula, a south and easterly flow south of Kodiak Island at 35 knots with a 20-foot sea. Easterlies inside Bristol Bay and southward. Look for 9 to 10-foot seas there tomorrow. And southwesterlies south of Sand Point with a 25-knot wind and 21-foot seas. That holds on to a more of a southwesterly direction on Friday. You'll notice a southerly flow coming across the peninsula, though, Anywhere from 7 to 11-foot seas and 25 to 30-knot winds are expected to wrap up the week. Northwesterlies are sweeping across the central and eastern parts of the Aleutians for Thursday. A variable flow at 15 knots around Kiska, and southeasterlies around the Attu Island region out toward Shemya. 20-knot wind with a 9-foot sea. Notice the seas and the wind switches directions more from a west and southwesterly flow. 20 to 30-knot winds all the way from Nikolsky on the northern side of the Bering Sea up toward 30 knots with a 14-foot sea. Northwesterlies there north of Adak and Atka, 20 knots. Freezing spray will be an issue there for both days. And a southerly flow develops out across the west with 15 knots and a 7-foot sea. Coming down the west coast, northerlies continue there, and that will advance that ice edge slowly again toward St. Matthew and southward again. 7 to 10-foot seas are expected from Nunivak Island westward toward St. Matthew in the ice-free waters, and around the Pribilofs, a 40-knot wind from the north with a 14-foot sea. Easterlies around Kuskokwim Bay at 35 knots. That becomes southerly on Friday. 10-foot seas there, 14-foot seas around the Pribilofs. Southeasterlies driving north of Nunivak Island. Easterlies coming offshore of Amonach, and then that northerly flow continues around St. Matthew at 40 knots. Across the north slope, expect an easterly flow again with that stronger flow making it to about 35 knots or so around Kaktovik. Easterlies blowing and drifting the snow at times around Barrow, and it's picking up a little bit of speed just west of Wainwright. Northerlies into Kotzebue Sound at 20 knots. That changes to more of an easterly direction on Friday, with easterlies continuing across the Beaufort Seacoast and parts of the Chukchi Seacoast, so the winds diminish somewhat just off of Cape Lisburne. Recapping tonight's weather, periods of heavy rain are expected across the northern and eastern parts of the Gulf Coast. Some of that could reach as high as 6 to 8 inches of rain just before 3 o'clock tonight around Yakutat. Flood advisories are posted here, and heavy rain potential through the remainder of the week will continue for the eastern parts of the Kenai Peninsula and Prince William Sound. So if you have issues already with flooding there or ponding of water, expect more of that to come to wrap up your week. Periods of accumulating snow possible across the Brooks Range. Look for a couple inches there, as well as parts of the northwestern sections of the Arctic coast. Freezing rain will remain light, but it is possible for south and western sections of Alaska tonight and tomorrow, and a blizzard watch begins tomorrow afternoon for the Pribilofs as the low moves into the Bering. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.